that don't know me, I'm Dr. Ronit Vilan, and I have Serenity Holistic Healthcare in Bayside, which is a wellness office where I combine looking at people's chemical, emotional, and structural challenges and helping them get to the next level of health. I've known Jim for a number of years. He was a patient of mine, and then I practiced in another state. And when I returned, we reconnected, and he'll share with you his story of health, which really, he really walks the talk. He really has made such significant changes in his health. And I think we have a lot to learn from him. So I just want to give you a little bit of bio about James Spellos. He's the president of Meeting You, a company specializing in helping people become more productive and comfortable with technology. Jim is certified as a Microsoft Office specialist. He delivers over 100 seminars annually on how to use technology more efficiently and how it is altering the nature of business. And that's why sometimes I don't get to see him. He was a faculty member at New York University, teaching in the School of Professional and Continuing Studies for over 25 years, and was honored with both their Award for Teaching Excellence and their Outstanding Service Award. In 2014, Jim joined the board of directors for Rock and Wrap It Up, an anti-poverty, anti-hunger think tank, which supports food recovery for over 43,000 agencies in North America by recovering excess food from events and facilities. Jim co-created their Whole Earth Calculator app, which helps organizations identify the quantity of food donated and carbon footprint reduced by an organization helping to recover excess food from events. Jim is also an accomplished musician and songwriter, and released his first solo recording, Stroke of Genius, at the end of 2019. Take it away.
I will do that. Thank you so much, Doc, and good afternoon or good evening to you all. It is so cool to be here to share a story, a bunch of stories with you. So why don't we just go right now and start this up. So I have essentially my screen shared. This is called Tech Tools for a Healthy Life. So what Doctor said is I teach technology for a living. I go around, I talk to people about technology, and I talk to people how it can really impact what they do and make them more productive. Sometimes, though, you don't take your own advice. So let's just give you a little bit of visual background about me. Because when Dr. Vilan first met me, I sort of looked like this. And there was at least one, if not two gerbils that I swallowed that day in order to get to look that way. And it wasn't necessarily anything I thought was a horrible thing. And clearly teaching over the years hasn't been maybe say the prettiest thing in the world. But as you might have noticed right now, it's a little bit different. And I got this real significant story to tell you about part of that journey and how I was woefully unprepared with all the technology that I talk about to be able to feel proper, better. So on a date about 3.5 years ago, I heard those words. Do you want the drug? I heard that before. Freshman year of college comes to mind, but no, that's another story for another time. This time, it was actually on a specific date, December 19th, 2016. And at that time, I was heading out to, as the doctor mentioned, I do some work with an organization called Rock and Wrap It Up, and we were wrapping presents for the kids. But what happened is I'm leaving the house, I started to feel very weird. It was kind of undescribable even to this day. I can't tell you anything other than at one moment I felt strange and weird, and then all of a sudden it went away. And what I was about to do is actually drive out, and that's my driveway. And if you live in New York, you understand that driveways are that narrow, and that even in the best of times, not playing pinball there is a really, really common thing to do. But this wasn't the best of times, because by the time I got to the street and started to move up to the corner, I realized I had no control over the right side of my body. That completely, my arm and my leg completely weren't there anymore. And the first concern was stopping the car, because I was about to going 30 miles an hour at that point. But things were with me, it was aligned. I was able to slam on the brakes with my left foot, pull over, and call my wife and say, call 911, I don't know what's going on. Now, sort of side story and all this. So I'm waiting for ambulance and I'm waiting for Marge to get there, but obviously I can still speak and I can still communicate. I still have one side of my body. And I'm thinking what I really need is a breath of fresh air. So on 53rd Avenue in Queens, I opened up the car door, I stepped out, and wham, I hit the ground really quickly because I couldn't walk at all. Cars are going back and forth, kind of thinking that I might need some help, but didn't want to admit it. Actually, a guy stopped and he said, "Can I help you, sir?" And you know what I said? I said, "No, I'm okay. I can take care of this myself." A few minutes later, another person stopped, a woman stopped this time. She goes, "Do you need any help?" And I said, "Yeah, can you help me get back in the car?" Now, I'll never forget this because when she said that to me, she was smoking a cigarette and she was right at the very butt end of the cigarette. And I didn't hear another word from her. She put the cigarette butt down. She came over to my right arm. She sort of pulled me up and got me in the car, didn't say anything else, picked up her cigarette, walked away. Not going to complain. So ambulance gets there, my wife gets there. She actually set the world land speed record in running to get there at that point. But get to the hospital and get into the emergency room, and that's where that phrase came up. You see, they immediately diagnosed me as having a stroke, and an ischemic stroke. And they talked about this drug. It's called TPA, tissue plasminogen activator. And I put it on there because I can never remember what the words are. I just remember the acronym. But essentially what it does is it prevents any distribution of the stroke going further in your body. And the doctor said, okay, well, you have about 40% of the patients, what this will do is literally prevent any other clotting from occurring. I go, great. And he said, 50% is going to act more like a placebo. Nothing will happen. Now, I still have my math skills, and there was 10% missing there. I said, what happens with that other 10%? And he said, well, you'll hemorrhage and die immediately. Do you want the drug? I figured the odds were in our favor. Marge and I talked to each other. We took it. Smartest move that we made. So I'm now identified as a fall risk. This, however, comes to a lot of humor to my family and friends who know that I've always been a fall risk anyway, but at this point now it's official. And I'm in the hospital trying to figure out what to do next. I get a little bit of information about my brain, which my neurologist showed me that this is what the brain looks like. And this is part of what your brain looks like right now, because the stroke has actually prevented blood from getting to a certain part. And that's why I couldn't walk anymore. So now you're laying there. You have nothing but time. You have data. I have all these instruments lined up around me. By the way, that 173/93 blood pressure, I would have absolutely taken that while I was in the hospital because it was over about 210 over 120. Now, when I first met Dr. Vilan, I was probably close to that, but wasn't aware of it. So I realized that I got really lucky. And I'm lying in intensive care one day, and I said, you know what? I'm an idiot, because I spent how many years teaching people about technology, and there was all these cool tools out there to help you with your health and safety, and I never implemented any of them. So I made a pact with myself that day, and I said, when I get better, one of the things I want to be able to do is share what these tools are, and that's really what this is about. So what we're going to do today is talk about 4 different areas. We're going to talk about emergency apps and how important they are for you to have on your phone. By the way, they're not only important for you, they're important for your loved ones as well. If you have older parents, having stuff like this can be absolutely critical. We're going to talk about your phone. We're going to talk about settings that you need to adjust. We need to get you a little bit deeper into what your phone can do and how to make sure that if you do have an emergency, that it's ready. We're going to talk about your battery life. And it's kind of an odd thing to talk about when we talk emergencies, but the bottom line is if your battery's dying, you're not going to have much life left in you either in that sort of emergency. And then lastly, we're going to talk about a healthy lifestyle. We'll talk about how I actually got from eating 2 gerbils a day or whatever it was to where I am right now. So that's the game plan. If you have any questions during the session, put them in chat. Dr. Vilan might share a few. We'll talk about them at the end. We want to make sure that before we finish today, all of your questions are covered, that you're comfortable with what we're talking about. We're going to start with the acronym ICE. It stands for in case of emergency, and it's what almost all first responders are taught to look for if they find somebody and they get their phone and they're able to see who to contact in case of emergency. So it's really, really kind of amazing that there's a challenge here, but there is, and that's because with real good reason, we secure our phones. We have a password. And even though I've gone through all this, I still have a very extensive password to get into any of my devices. So we have to figure out how we make sure that if something happens to you, that someone finds you, they're able to get your phone, they know, are you taking medication? Do you have pre-existing conditions? They know the information that's required for them to be able to treat you the best way possible. So the solution is an accessible app information with your contact and medical history in case of emergency. And so what I want to do at this point is sort of talk about the process itself. You have a lot of options to download information. And we're going to talk both about iPhone, iOS, and Android. So no matter which type of smartphone you have options available. And we're going to, with the iOS folks, you have something called ICE Medical and ICE Auto, which look very much the same. With Android, you have Medical ID and ICE Standard. You know, if you go into the App Store, you're going to find a host of different options that are there. Most of them are free. Some of them might cost $1 or $2. I always tell people when it comes to apps and anything with technology, use the free version first. Make sure it works for you. And then if you think it's good, then definitely pay for whatever that amount is. The approach is called freemium, and that's how a lot of services are delivered these days. We'll give you a try at no cost, and then if you like it, you can pay us for what you need to use. So let's do one at a time. Let's do Android first, and then we'll do the iPhone. So we'll cover everyone in here. And what I'm going to show you is a series of screenshots. In this case, for Android, it's for the Medical ID app. So the first thing that'll happen is you go to the App Store and you'll go and you'll find a bunch of them. If you just type in ICE or in case of emergency in the App Store under that search bar that you'll see right about here, then you'll get a whole host of these. This is one of the ones that I use. So you get it, you download it. Then when you open it up, it looks like this. Now, unless your name is John Doe, you're going to need to change the name that's on there and all the information that's about you. And in fact, the top note that they're giving, we'll talk about in a second, because we're going to have to get to making sure that the folks who need to find this about you can do so. So you'll create the profile, you put your information in there, and you know, obviously you see it says here, I had an ischemic stroke on 12/19. You put whatever you need into the medication that you're taking, all of that can go in there. Yet once you complete that, it's going to ask you for permission to add a widget on your lock screen. Now, while we're doing this, I'm going to very briefly unshare my screen because I want to show you my phone, and you'll see on my screen here, there is this red area. It's called, it says in case of emergency, and it says tap the emergency icon. Regardless of which type of device that you have, let me get some water. There we go. No matter which type of device that you have, that is going to be what the first responders are going to look for. And so if I was to tap that right now, up would come the emergency information, and they'd be able to see everything they need to see about myself. So that in case of emergency, regardless of which of the different tools you're using, is what you want to have sitting on top of the lock screen. Now, you might not be comfortable. You might go, well, that means they can get into the rest of my phone. And the answer is no. They only have access to that one particular app. So it's designed to keep your privacy, yet still give you the ability to be able to have the information accessible to those who need it. So you need to give the app permission to add a widget on your lock screen, which is really important. Once you do that, then it might even ask you that the medical ID accessibility service hasn't been enabled. They'll tell you what needs to be done. And if you say yes to this, it'll show you a video. It'll show you how to do it. Now, I'm not going to say this isn't without frustrations in getting these things set up. They each do things a little different way. Different operating systems work differently, but you walk through the steps there. You download it, you enter your profile, you get it on your lock screen, and you're done. If you have an iPhone or an iPad, works very similar way. You go to the store and you put in, I put in ICE Standard, and you're going to see right there ICE Medical Standard as one of the options that's there. Again, as I've always said, go for the free ones. If they do what you need them to do, you don't even need to pay anything for this. And if you do need to pay, it's going to probably be somewhere in the $2 to $4 range. Then you go in there, You enter all your information. You see my medications in there. And then you're going to be able to, at the very bottom of the screen, you might see where this red circle is. It says wallpaper there. That's what you need to do on the iPhone to get it as wallpaper on your phone. So once you do that, it'll come up with a screen like this, and it's going to say, create lock screen image. And it also is going to give you some really good advice. It says moving the app icon to the top left corner of the first screen is recommended. Now, in case the folks who get your phone, who are able to help you out, do have access to your phone, they know to look at the top left corner of your phone for anything with respect to in case of emergency. Whether you have one app there or multiple apps, put them in the top left corner of the home screen. Because again, in case something happens, that's going to give them the ability to easily access that information. So one more time on this, the 3 steps to your safety initially is you download the app, you update the information to include what you have, and then you access the lock screen so that it's always available. And even those initials stand for dull, this is anything but a dull thing to do for you and your loved ones. If you take one thing out of this conversation we're having today, is that having that in case of emergency sitting on top of your phone is going to be the life save. And as I've said, not just for yourself, but your family, your friends, if you have older parents, clearly, you know, I remember with my mom, before she passed away, we would have the life alert on there. And we had it on there. She didn't know how to use it. It sat there even the times that she needed it. But I'm thinking that if she actually had the ability at that point to have a smartphone, you know, having something that once help came, that they were able to see all the information they needed would have been fantastic. Okay, now, let me rant for 30 seconds about the phone companies, because your phone has emergency settings that are really good. Yet every time they do an update, they move them around. So don't even get me started on why. I think it's the silliest thing that happens. But what I want you to do is I want you, whether you're on Android or on Apple, I want you to look for your emergency settings. But I'm going to help you out here, because there are panic buttons that both phones have by default in there that I want you to be able to access. So let's start with Android again. You go to your settings, the button on your home screen that says settings. Here's where it becomes an adventure. You might go for privacy and emergency. In some phones, it might say privacy and safety. In other phones, it might say advanced features. Just really pisses me off. But I want you to be able to find where that is, because what you're looking for is the ability to send an SOS message. And then it'll give you more information. It'll allow you to send the messages to somebody, and you even can add pictures and recording. Once you've enabled that and you've identified who to send it to, if you press your power button quickly 3 times on the phone, that will send out an SOS message on the Android. Now, I know my wife's on the line. I know she's gotten a lot of false SOS messages because the phone button gets stuck or it's in my pocket somewhere. Just one of the things that we have to deal with at this point, because the bottom line is that if you can't talk, if I couldn't have had that conversation, I'd be able to press the ice button and then, or press the power button 3 times. If you're on iProducts, you have the same thing, different place. You go to settings, you're gonna go for emergency SOS. You're gonna toggle the auto call on, that way it automatically makes that call. And then it'll give you a countdown sound. So if you accidentally trigger it, within 3 seconds, you can stop it. The other thing that Apple has really good and much better than other Android phones is the iOS Health app, which you should definitely fill out with your information. It could seem redundant having that and another ICE app, but having it in 2 places isn't gonna hurt you. Not having it in either place might. And so in order to enable that panic, you would press the sleep wake button 5 times, which I think is better than the 3 times on Android. But either way, both of the major players in terms of Android and iOS have panic buttons. Yet no fear, if those don't work, you can go to your app store and there's an app that is called, yep, the red panic button. And that way it just has a big button that's on your screen that once you hit it, you're able to access that. I do like having the built-in stuff, quite frankly, with both Android and iOS, because if something's happening to you, you might not have the wherewithal to be able to figure out where is that app again. But if you're just pressing the power button, more likely you're going to be able to do it. So what I want you to be able to do, and whether you do it now or do it afterwards, really, really important. I want you to find your phone's emergency settings, just what we talked about. I want you to go into settings and see where it's hidden. And once you're there, take a look at the different things that it can enable for you to be able to, in case something happens, with one touch or pressing a button 3 times, to give you that safety and give you that sense of hopefully comfort and support that help is on the way. Now, some of us have either Google Home or Alexa. We actually have both, and that's another conversation for another time. But the question is, if something happens to you at home, can you use them to call 911? And the answer, unfortunately, is no. Federal regulations have still prevented that from happening because the responders do want to get to a person. It doesn't mean, though, that these aren't going to be useful in case of a home emergency, and I'll tell you why. There are a number of tools out there. The one I'm showcasing right now is called askmybuddy.net. You go to that website, you sign up for an account. If you only want like 2 or 3 people on there in terms of being the person that would be contacted, you can get that free of charge. Once you set that up, you can ask either Alexa or Google, hey, inform my buddies, and they'll give you the full amount of what you need to say. It's very, very simple, and you can then use your voice to be able to trigger the help to your friends that can contact 911. So even though neither Alexa or Google Home can do it directly, these voice skills, which are becoming more and more popular as we would get into other technology conversations, becomes absolutely critical to have at least one of them set up in case something happens. And you know what, quite frankly, again, if my mom was still around, I might not have had a smartphone, but I probably would have put one of these in her bedroom to make sure that she has at least that level of comfort that she can say, and hopefully remember, ask my buddy, contact my friends, I'm having a medical emergency. Free account. If you having only a few people contacted, completely free of charge. If you find another one that works for you, that's great too. I'm not wed to any one of these. I am wed to the ability of you having that capability to save your life. So the next question we got to ask is, how much is your battery suck power? So we all know that one of the biggest frustrations that we have is that the power on our battery tends to go at the worst time. And so one of the thoughts that I had after having the stroke was that I was lucky I was in a car, and I was lucky to be able to have access to power there. But let's give you 101, maybe a 102 on power management on your phone battery. It's all done in what's called milliamps, milliampere per hour. You don't need to know the stuff. You don't need to know any of that. But if you see something that looks like MAH, it's going to be a number, and that's going to be how much power your phone has. And quite frankly, it makes perfect sense. The higher the MAH, the more power your phone has. In fact, when I buy a phone now, haven't done that in a while, but I'm always looking at the top end of that screen because I want to make sure that I have enough power to get me through the day and clearly to get me through an emergency. Now, the iPhone 10 must be great. It has 2 batteries in there, not so much. Problem here is number of batteries don't necessarily equate with the amount of power the phone has. We're all going to get the phone that we're most comfortable with. You know, if you were to ask me my opinion on phones, I'd tell you Android. I'm a huge Android fan. Some of you like iPhones. To me, you use what you're comfortable with. But you want to make sure that no matter what you use, that we understand that managing to have enough power in that case of emergency is critical. So sometimes not a good thing. And I don't know if you remember a few years ago, the Samsung Note 7 that spontaneously combusted in people's pockets and ended up looking like that. That's not what we want in terms of power, just so we're clear on this. So how do you increase your battery life? There's a couple of very clear things you can do or choose not to do in order to make your battery last longer. This is regardless of whether you're in an emergency situation or not. The first thing we're going to talk about is what I like to call the location conundrum. Why? Because having your location always on is one of the biggest drains of your battery. And until December 19th, 2016, I never had my location on until I needed it. I always wanted to be secure, wanted to make sure that people weren't, getting information to me. And bottom line is, I don't know if something's going to happen, so I don't have that luxury anymore. I have my location on all the time. I would suggest for you that you might want to consider that as well. But if you don't, realize that some of the emergency tools and services, and especially being able to pinpoint where you are, is very much tied to your location being on, your GPS being accessible. So we might ignore that one, but we do have to get to the next biggest culprit of your battery wearing down, and that's your screen brightness. The brighter your screen, the more power it draws. In fact, it's the only electrical part of how a phone works. So I always do this. I manage my screen brightness. I keep it as low as I need it. When I go outside, I need to use it, I bring it up, I bring it back down. I manage the stuff. One consistent theme that you're hearing, and it doesn't take a lot of time, but it does take just a bit of awareness, is to be able to access these different tools in the settings of the different phones, to be able to manage and get your information, to get your phones lasting longer. Now let's talk about notifications, about all these things popping up on your screen. I mean, really, every single app wants to actually notify you. Most of them don't, many of them do. We know the big culprits. Some of them we want on all the time. Email, texting, others marginally, Facebook, social media. Some others you don't want on at all. But did you know that when these apps come into your phone, they are automatically set to be on? And so I want you, again, when you start playing with your phone, that 20 minutes you're going to spend after the session, to make sure your phone's set up well. I want you to go, regardless of which phone you have, settings, notifications, and take a look at the apps. Take a look at all the apps, because each one you're going to be able to see whether it has notifications on. You might need to turn them all off manually, and that might take a little while, but I will guarantee you it's going to save you a lot of battery power time. And by the way, just something that's frustrating, but we have to deal with, is that when an app sends you an update, oftentimes they change the notifications back to what they want. Just be aware that if your battery in your phone, you've done the other work and it's not doing great, it's drawing more power than you think, you're not getting the life that you need, well, just go to the notifications. You'll have a huge benefit in your battery. So we've talked about location. We've talked about screen brightness notifications. By the way, vibration versus ring, the vibration takes up more power. So again, if you get a lot of messages, you get a lot of calls, you might want to keep it off of vibration. Please turn off Wi-Fi, Bluetooth when not in use. Not only is that a security comment I'm making to you to make sure that you're not hacked, but clearly it has a lot of benefits in terms of the power management of your phone. Now, power packs and cases. I used to be a huge fan until very recently of the Mophie pack that you would put your phone in and would have an extra full charge. The reason I say used to be is I'm finding that they wear out after a short amount of time, and you have to now start taking your phone out in order to be able to charge them. But I want you to consider, instead of just a regular case for your phone, a power pack for your phone. And that way you have a double amount of power on there. Some people say it makes the phone too heavy. Some people say they like the feel of it, it's more substantial. But either way, these are purchases, I'll say the $40 to $80 range for the most part. You can get like the top image on the screen looks like. You can get an external case that's pretty heavy to walk around with, but you got choices. You have choices to be able to see what might work best in terms of extending your battery life. Now, it dies because of recharging. The standard lifespan of a battery is about 300 to 500 charges. And if you charge every day, it means within about a year and a half, your battery is going to get a lot less strong than you used to. And we've probably all seen it. You go, why all of a sudden is my battery not lasting as long? Well, that's because a charging cycle is made to be limited in terms of how many times you can recharge it. They define it by any time you charge below 70%, and quite frankly, a good strategy to have is don't continually top off your phone. If you said 85%, you want it at 100, let it go down. Let it go down to a full charging cycle. Sometimes those top offs might affect your battery even more. And in an argument that I had many years ago with my wife, and she won, was about whether you should put all your phones plugged in at the end of the night. Because the way it used to be was you'd overcharge your phone, they'd heat up, they'd actually lose and damage the battery. But the reality, probably since 2015 and clearly in 2020, is overcharging is a myth. So if you want to have your phone plugged in at the end of the night, and so you have it at 100% at the beginning of the day, go for it. By the way, in your car, once we get back to a semi-reasonable lifestyle, once all the COVID stuff is starting to get by us, whatever that might be, what should you use in your car to charge? So you got the cigarette lighter there, but then the cars come with the USB ports. And here's the thing, we all think that the USB port's the best way to go. It's not. The cigarette lighter is your best bet because it draws more power directly to your devices. And in fact, you want it to be the stuff you get at 7-Elevens, they're cheap, don't even buy them. They're not going to hold power. But if you get one that has at least 2.1A, you'll see this image right here. It says 2.4A. These are like the charger that you have at home. So you're going to be able to get a quick and really effective charge. But make sure you have at least 2.1A per port. So it's a USB on one side, but on the side that it plugs into the car, it is in the cigarette lighter. By the way, anytime that you're doing any of these charges, it does count as a full charging cycle, just so you're aware of that. So we've talked about the battery. Let's talk some more about some apps. A couple of critical emergency apps to have. It's a great one called First Aid, free of charge. It'll tell you what to do in case of emergencies. If something happens to your son or your daughter or your spouse or your loved one, whomever it might be, you know, if you see something, if there's major bleeding, if there's a broken bone, it'll always, of course, tell you the first thing you should do is call emergency help, but it'll give you ideas as to what to do to minimize the problem until the first responder gets to you. Life 360 or Glimpse, they're two different apps that do the same thing. They allow you to always be in touch with a loved one. So I use Life 360. When it's chosen to be used by people that I've given access to, they can see where I am at any point. I mean, pinpoint accuracy. You know, I do know a lot of parents, and I'm not going to get into good or bad on this, who put the Life 360 app in their kid's phone when they're sleeping, and that way they have a clear view of where they are. I'm not going to get into that, but you see, those sort of tools are available. And if you have someone that travels a lot and you want to know where they are, it's not a bad investment. Of course, the investment is zero cost. The iProducts do have some good stuff. The Find My Friends also gives it that capability, again, if they have their location on. And in case, and this is more outside of what happened to me, but in case somebody gets a concussion, the PAR CRR app will tell you what to do to monitor that person to be able to determine whether you need to bring them to the emergency room right away or whether they don't have symptoms that align themselves with a concussion. Again, in all cases, medical advice and information supersedes anything you get on an app. But to have these for that first immediate approach really has a lot of value. So, you know, maybe if I had some of the stuff on here and I was really aware, I wouldn't have swallowed those 2 gerbils that obviously I did in this picture. So how do you get rid of all that stuff? And what you're probably hoping is, yeah, you know, the Pop-Tarts and Twinkies approach would really be the ideal approach to be able to take care of you. So I'd love to say that that's how I lost almost 100 pounds. Not the case. So don't want to get preachy on this, but I'm a huge believer in plant-based, whole food, plant-based diet. I've lost 91 pounds at this point. Clearly, if I had done this earlier, I probably wouldn't have had the stroke. But I want to be able to share. There's an amazing organization here in the city called Plant Powered Metro New York. They'll give you all the information you need and give you webinars and cooking tips and all that. And in fact, since we are rifling this whole conversation into technology, which is what I want to make sure you're clear on, your healthy food choices in terms of websites, and you want to get some of the science behind why plant-based is healthy, PCRM, the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, is amazing. Dr. Barnard, who's pictured there, does podcasts. In fact, they do something called the Exam Room every day that talks about the healing capabilities. And it has been clearly designated and identified by evidence-based science that whether you have diabetes or certain cancers, reduction of the possibility of stroke, not elimination, still can happen, all part of the plant-based community. Dr. Michael Greger and Nutrition Facts is amazing. He has done some incredible work and puts out a new video every day, researching the science and bringing it into layman's terms. Love that sort of stuff. You know, I had a lot of time at home after the stroke, and I wanted to make sure that the stuff I was reading was accessing my health properly. So what about apps for tech choices? I like Foodeducate. You're able to point at a label and see what's in the food. Sugar AR Mon, as in monster, was very cutting edge. That allowed you to be with your kids and have them point a phone at a product, and it will tell you all these sugar monsters that are in the food. Pretty clever stuff. Open Food Facts, another great database of food that's out there. Happy Cow plays if you do believe in a vegetarian or vegan lifestyle. And clearly Dr. Greger's Daily Dozen talks about what you need to be eating. There's a whole cool black beans over there. I wish I could bring you all in, but social distancing won't let me right now. Neither would Zoom, actually, so that's another thing. So other healthy lifestyle, healthy apps, good thing to do, meditation. I use the Calm app. 7-minute workout by Johnson & Johnson, especially down the road. If you're not at your computer, if you are on the road at some point traveling, having an app free of charge that allows you to give you very good, quick information and workouts, wonderful. I tend to go a little bit longer with the workouts, either yoga with Adrian or what I use on a daily basis, fitnessblender.com. Great stuff. All this stuff is not going to help you in case the emergency occurs. It's going to help you before the emergency occurs. Now, health and medical apps. There's lots of conversation about the Fitbits, and here's the scoop on it. A Fitbit itself, walking 10,000 steps isn't going to be critical to your lifestyle. Moving every day and being active is critical to your lifestyle. So if you have a Fitbit, and let me just show you something. Okay, I'm going to stop the share for a second. I have some friends who would do this. So they had a Fitbit. At the end of the day, it said 9,822 steps. You know what they would do? They would start shaking their hand as fast as they could, left and right, so that the counter goes up to 10,000. Really, guys? Really? I don't think that's how we want to use those particular apps. But if you use it to make sure you're getting a good workout, you're getting your walks in, fantastic. Now, on top of that, you have some stuff that's starting to really get cutting edge with information that is supported by the medical community. And we're going to talk about two right here, Cartier and Omron. And I'm going to go to their website to show them to you. And the reason I want to do that right now is because I want to make sure that you understand that some of the stuff that's out there doesn't necessarily, you know, the iPhone and the iWatch and all that stuff, there's a lot of false positives and false negatives out there of information. So I never want to rely on one of those. So I talked to my cardiologist about some of the stuff. He talked about to me this product, Cardia, that actually has been approved by FDA for medical grade EKG anytime. If you have AFib or any heart issues, it might not be a bad idea to go with that, or with the Omron, which actually has accurate blood pressure readings. And in fact, the only problem I have with both of these is they're expensive, you know, so sometimes you can't always have that access to that information. But if you could, those are the two I'd go for. So you can do everything right. You can get the apps on your phone. You can have all the people connected. You can do the good work. You can eat healthy. You can eat a whole food diet. And sometimes stuff just happens, you know. So about 15 months after my stroke, I all of a sudden felt a little tightness in my chest. And long story short, I went to my cardiologist. He goes, "No, you're doing everything right, but let's check." And the last check that he did, a nuclear stress test, got me into the emergency room pretty much immediately. And they found what's called the Widowmaker artery, which I knew the minute he said that it wasn't a good name, was blocked 99%. And by the way, the other artery is blocked 80% on the right side. So everything you can do, you never know what might happen to affect your health. But the bottom line in this entire conversation that we're having is there are tools out there, for the most part free of charge, that allows you to be able to control how you can connect and communicate with those in case of emergency. And to me, if all that I've done here over the 40 minutes or so that I've been talking helps one person one time, it'll be more than worthwhile to me. So at this point, I'm going to say thank you so much. And Dr. Vilan, do we have any questions that people have or you have from the conversation?
We do. Someone had asked a question, something about replacing iPhone health app.
Mhm. Well, I know the iHealth app, which they keep updating, is an important thing to use. Since I'm an Android guy, I don't have as much experience, but I do have an iPad, and the iHealth app has all that same information that we saw with the ICE medical emergency. The thing that you got to understand is that these manufacturers create apps that are going to work better with their own products. So it always comes down to use what works for you, use what's going to be the easiest for you to put in there and to make sure that they are always up to date and active.
Great, thank you. Well, someone also commented that their mom has been using the Calm app, and she and her mom also love it. So that's good to know.
Every day I do at least 10 to 15 minutes on the Calm app. I think it's great that part of the conversation about health is getting your blood pressure down, which obviously is one of my issues. And that, along with healthy eating, losing the weight, is what really created that from going down from 220 over 110 in the hospital. I'm a geek, so I log all this stuff. Hold on a second. What was my reading this morning? My reading this morning was 114 over 58. So it does work. Keeping it monitored and making sure that you do all the healthy things for your life.
Someone also had a question regarding when you add the emergency contacts in the emergency SOS, are they going to be notified?
If you have the emergency contacts, that SOS is going to go out to whomever you identify. So it will go out to them. And again, if it's voice coming from the Alexa or Google, it's going to only go to them because it can't go to 911. But if it's going to, it's on your phone, it's going to both 911 services as well as the people you've identified.
Great.
I've actually set mine up to go only to my wife and not to 911 because I was afraid of all those false negatives, false positives that happen when you accidentally, hit the power button 3 or 5 times.
Right. And someone had a question whether it's true that phones give off certain microwaves that cause cancer cells. I know they give off waves.
They absolutely give off waves. I can't answer that because everything I've read is mixed. That they do, they don't. It's a little bit, it's harmful, it's not harmful. I'd say like with all technology, a lot of health benefits will be known a generation from now. So you gotta make your own bed and sleep it in terms of what you feel is useful. Even with something as simple as the medical app, people have said, well, you have that medical app that anyone can grab your phone and steal that information about you. You're right, they can see that information. We got to make trade-offs. So I unfortunately can't give an answer with any scientific validity that says they cause cancer or not. I've read research, I've seen both. My hunch is still unknown, and maybe it's not a bad idea to put the phone down every once in a while, but have it nearby in case of emergency.
Definitely. Someone asked where to find MAH.
The Milliamp. So when you are buying a phone, or when you're in the Verizon store or the T-Mobile store, any of them, they're going to have the data on each phone. And if they don't, you just ask the salesperson, what is the milliamp per hour? And they're going to look at you saying, well, how do you know that? And then they're going to be able to tell you exactly what it's at. If you go onto their websites, they always have it on there. That's how I found out everything from that entire list. I was able to go there and just see exactly what each phone has. They put those out as part of the specs before the phone is even released, or just at the point of its release.
Great. So that's all the questions we had under the chat, unless people want to maybe raise their hands and ask a question, we can unmute them.
Yeah, well, let's unmute everyone and see if it doesn't become a free-for-all. We'll find out in a second. Probably will become a free-for-all, but that's okay. And we'll get everybody on the video screen too. So let's see what we have here.
Somebody's playing music.
There we go. So if you're playing music, you can turn it off. If you're not playing music, and I think we might have to turn the sound off in a second. Yeah, hold on. It's
I
going
wasn't
away.
able to get in.
Nah. Hold on a second. Let's do this. Much better. Doc, I have you unmuted and me unmuted. But if you have a question right now, why don't you just raise your hand? Or if you have a comment you want to make, please feel free to do so. Or even better, what did you find most useful? What was the information that we gave you that's going to be helpful? Sil, you have a question? Let me get you on here. Hold on a second.
Okay.
Go for it.
No, I just want to say it was very useful. As somebody who lives by himself and is a bit of a klutz, you can ask Dr. Vilan because she's been treating me for my neck. I find this fascinating, and I know what I'm going to be doing for the next hour or so, getting into all these different ones. And I personally want to thank you. You've opened up a whole new area for me, which is I have a brother who has Alzheimer's, who's still functioning, but we worry a little bit about him. And the Life 360, I think, will come in very handy. So I appreciate it, and I want to thank you. And Dr. Ronit, thank you for getting me involved.
One thing to note, I just want to put this back on the screen again. You are welcome at any time, any one of you, to reach out to me if you have questions. Because one thing I hate in terms of anytime I go to a session myself is that you get this good information, then a day or so later, you're trying to process it, and you're not 100% comfortable and clear about that. If you need to reach me, send me an email. If you need any help with any of the stuff installing it, I'm going to be there for you. I don't want this to be just a one and done type of conversation, because it just doesn't work that way. So Sil, thank you for sharing that. I'm so glad that it helped out. Oh, you're so welcome. Looking around, any other comments? I know I see so many cool people in here that I know, and so many cool people I don't. And Ms. Natalie has her hand up, so I'm not surprised.
What I think was the best is the ice. I think that's just simple, basic, and really sensible. I like that a lot. And I just wanted to double check. You mentioned the Twinkies. I didn't hear about the ring dings.
No, the ring dings don't work. It's only the Twinkies and the Pop-Tarts that work at that point. Okay. And clearly, as we all know, neither of them work that well. But we tried for many, many years until we found the right way to go. In fact, it's great to see Leanna Levine in here, who is the head of the Planned Parenthood Metro New York. Thank you for stopping in and being here as well. So, questions, comments, looking for hands being raised or put it in. Someone said, can I speak on how I made my transformation in weight? Yeah, I can. I went plant-based. I was 282 pounds. I tried a bunch of different things. Didn't work. It worked for a while. Then I gained it back and it worked. I gained it back. So finally, I think I had myself around 270, and I was in an airport, and I just had another crummy meal at an airport because I travel or used to travel an awful lot. And I reached out to my wife. I said, I was reading something on my phone, and I saw this book. And actually, let me see if I can pull it down. It's right here. Oh yeah, a book from Mark Bittman. It's called Vegan Before 6, and he wrote this many years ago. And what happened was I saw it pop up like it was meant to be in my ads on the side of my phone where I was reading. And I immediately reached out to Marge and I said, let's do this. Now, she had told me about it a year before, and I ignored her because I was an idiot. But once we started doing that, in essentially the philosophy was 2 meals a day, you eat vegan, 1 meal, you eat what you eat. And to me, what it really became was a great transitional approach. I don't think we went full on plant-based, and there's still maybe once a year that something does get in there that isn't, but until after the heart issue. And that, when we started really learning about what the folks at the Physicians Committee and Nutrition Facts and Planned Parenthood New York talks about in terms of all the things, including oils that just aren't healthy for you, we realized that not only were we able to supercharge our health, but that's when the weight started coming off. And in fact, in the past 2 months, I'm down 15 more pounds. Because we really have tweaked it just enough to get a lot of the oils out of there. And we realized from what we've learned is all of that is just extra fat, that we don't need in the diet. And we love to cook. My wife's an amazing cook. And we don't need that stuff to make great foods. Now, the folks who are on here who come to our Thanksgiving, all bets are off on Thanksgiving. But if you've noticed last year that Marge and I were primarily eating all the sides, because for us, it's what makes us feel good and healthy.
There was also a question about the food scan app that said the ingredients.
Yeah, there's a couple of them that I mentioned. Food Ucate, Food, and I'll type it into the chat room so you see it's spelled properly, is one of them. And let me just get this here. So put that out there. That's one. And the others that are there, gosh, I'm blanking. This is when you have a stroke and you blank about things. Open Food Facts, right? That's the other one that was there. So those two. Great stuff. The Food Ucate is a great, easy to use app.
Great.
Other questions, other comments? You guys are awesome. Doctor, I'm going to turn it back over to you to close it up, but I really appreciate you having me here and allowing me to share this information with everyone.
I appreciate you for doing this for so many people, and I know that it's going to be passed on, like Sil was saying, to family members and friends. So you're really going to be touching a lot of people's lives. And, you know, again, just real high praise to you for making the changes, because as you and I discussed before we went on the call, that it's really, the change comes from in between our ears, right? If we want to make the change, we can.
Yep.
And once we do, then, you know, we reap the benefits with everything going on right now. You know, it's really about how healthy can you be now before the next storm. Don't wait till the storm to make the changes. Start making the changes now, little by little, so that we're prepared.
Absolutely. I'm just answering a question in the chat room about stroke, saying, is it just the luck of the draw? The thing that I learned in having the stroke from my cardiologist, who, I got to tell you, is one of the greatest people alive. And first day I met him was the first day in intensive care. And essentially he said to my wife and I don't care what insurance you have, I'm taking care of you. You know, you have that sort of medical support and you're blown away by it. But, you know, after going through all this, I asked him at one point, you know, what percentage of the strokes do you ever really find out what the cause is? And he said about 2/3. 2/3 of the stroke, you do not know what caused it. But the clear cause from so much is high blood pressure. And the high blood pressure is driven from diet, what you're eating, and it's also from not having a healthy lifestyle. You know, so clearly all this is sort of an inclusive additive effect that as you get each little part of your health in line, it's going to improve more and more your ability to fight these things. And actually right now, just focusing on COVID-19, you know, a lot of what they're saying is people with pre-existing conditions are having the worst outcomes. And one of those conditions they talk about is hypertension, high blood pressure, you know, as well as diabetes and stuff like that. So clearly, you know, right now, taking this opportunity to get your eating in order a little bit and take off a couple extra pounds and get that hypertension down, you know, from a non-medical person. Again, I'm not giving you medical advice. I'm giving you sort of advice from what I've clearly seen and read, as well as, you know, from what's worked for me and my family.
Great. Thank you again so much. Thank you for everybody who joined. And, you know, keep looking on my website, serenityholistic.com, for upcoming Zoom workshops. We really focus on many different topics, whether it's things you can change in your environment to clean it up, your food, your mind, your body, exercise, soul, everything.
Awesome.
Have a great rest of your evening, and we'll see you soon.